Cuphead is a name that has become synonymous with the word quality, using both animation and audio tricks that were the norm in the time they were emulating. Chad and Jared Moldenhauer did not stop working on this thing until they knew people playing it would love it just as much as they did. The passion and crazy high bar for effort is felt not just in the instant you pick up the controller, but the second you lay your eyes on any still frame from any boss. Between getting its own show, having a cameo on Smash Brothers, and even its own book, not a comic, an actual book, it's clear that it's left its mark on not just the indie scene, but video games in general. Even if they are from great video games, I could show my mom a picture of Quote or Shovel Knight, and she'd have no idea who those characters are. But Super Meat Boy and Cuphead have both reached a status where even some people who don't play video games at all have a chance of recognizing who they are, which I think is really, really saying something. Though there is one funny thing about Cuphead that I'll be addressing in this video. It's not even necessarily a problem, it's just funny. To this day, seeing Cuphead in motion is an absolute oddity, a malformation of time and space. It's simultaneously a rediscovered piece of 1930s lost media and a perfectly playable 2D action game from the late 2010s. These bosses don't even feel like they should all inhabit the same world, rather, it's like each one is plucked from its own old-timey show, complete with their own casts of characters. And for as entertaining as they are to look at, you'll have to get over it because every one of them demands your full attention. There are different ways to address all of them, since you not only have access to multiple weapons, but even different power-ups, like being able to turn invincible briefly when you dash. It's very obvious that the position of the bosses are deliberately designed to make you use different attacks, and nowhere was this more obvious in the entire game than with the final phase of the grim matchstick fight, which requires you to both run away from your target and dodge projectiles while dishing out enough DPS so that you eventually win. It was easier when I opted to use the lobber since he was in the bottom left of the screen, still a very tough fight regardless. Yet, no matter what this game puts you through, you'll find it hard to stay mad on account of all the giant goofy animations and expressions you'll see on each enemy, and watching yourself get better at each phase of each fight was incredibly fulfilling. The garden vegetables towards the beginning might not be as much of a problem as other enemies later down the line, but compared to your average video game, even Cuphead's weakest foes could make the final boss of lots of indies quiver in total fear. Shops and NPCs that give you items in the overworld certainly help you a little, but bosses aren't the only thing that'll stunt your progress here, because there are multiple areas that have no bosses at all. Some people take issue with the platforming stages, saying they're dull or just not well designed. While I agree that some of them have a little bit too much going on, as if they were an overzealous Mario Maker level, it never felt like a phoned-in part of the game that they just threw in there once people found out that bosses were a focal point. They remind me of the Contra games in that a lot of the difficulty comes from the plethora of enemies coming at you from all sides of the screen, not necessarily the jumping. There's even mini-bosses and an optional pacifist ranking you can get for completing an entire stage without hurting any enemies. Little details like this make it really hard for me to believe that these areas were an afterthought, especially since they're just as well drawn as everything else, and if anything, they're a great break from the main fights. I'm sorry for this next part of the video, but I have to tell you guys this. The story's so thinly constructed it almost feels weird to even stop and talk about it, but I can't not do that, because there's one part in particular that made me laugh. Basically, Cuphead and Mugman venture around these islands collecting soul contracts for the devil to repay their debt after accidentally fumbling all their wealth, but halfway through, I kid you not, the Elder Kettle from the beginning of the game randomly shows up to just say, "Hey, I have an idea. How about instead you just kill the devil?" And Mugman and Cuphead are just like, "Sure, that sounds fine." Like, it didn't even cross their minds. I just love this game. I love this game so much. It'd be foolish not to touch on the delicious last course while we're all here, because not only is it up to par with the unprecedented quality we've seen in vanilla Cuphead, but it addresses an issue I actually have with lots of not just DLCs, but game franchises as a whole. And to explain what I mean, I'm going to turn to Monster Hunter World, of all things. Because you see, for as amazing, grandiose, and fulfilling as Monster Hunter World is to play, it actually has a giant problem, and it's that it's one of the easiest Monster Hunter games ever made. This is partially from great quality of life improvements, which is fine, but another part is that lots of people playing this game will be coming off the backs of more than a handful of prior games in the series. So Monster Hunter World might not be objectively difficult, but to most people playing it, it can seem that way since they're going in with lots of prior experience they didn't have before. You might see where I'm going with this by now. And some may disagree with me on this, but I think the way Cuphead and the Delicious Last Course addresses this is by making the bosses a little bit more difficult than what you'd come to expect in the main game. Glumstone the Giant has an absolute plethora of different projectiles you have to worry about at the same time, and there's even a handful of bosses that you have to defeat without any projectiles at all. This could definitely end up being an issue for newer players if it weren't for the fact that getting to the DLC area isn't even possible in the opening hours of the game, which I think was a good choice. It still has that issue of not being entirely seamlessly integrated into the main title. Like, if there was a Game of the Year version of this that came out some years in the future, I think whoever's playing would think it's weird that there's just a cutscene here, but that's more a nitpick if anything else. Once you're in the thick of it and you're fighting not just giants, but armored horses and 3D castles, it'll be hard for you to not feel like you're discovering Cuphead all over again. And while it's a bit of a hard segue, tough times have fallen on the channel. I was recently let go from my day job, and this channel is one of the only sources of revenue I currently have. This video was actually created because it was requested by one of my supporters, so if you'd like to become one yourself and possibly have me cover a game you like, check the link in the pinned comment. Of course, please do all of the typical things content creators ask you to do, like subscribing and liking the video if you enjoyed what you saw today. I'd absolutely love if you did so. There's also a Discord link in the description. We're trying to hit the 500 member mark. It's an incredibly active place. I think you'll really like it. Thanks so much, and have a wonderful night. Bye-bye.
I'm Mr. King Dice. I'm the gamest in the land. I never play nice. I'm the devil's right-hand man. I can't let you pass, 'cause